Let's get going. Welcome everybody to our April webinar. I just had to think for a second then. We've only just started April. Today we're going to talk about understanding flexible work requests. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of all the various lands on which we are attending from today and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are attending with us today. So who are we? Well, my name is Carli Saw. I'm the Director of Strawberry Seed Consulting. We have been around for almost 11 years, and this is my gorgeous team, including our new HR intern, Ella, who might be very surprised to see herself on this slide today. We provide HR support to small to medium businesses right across Australia. And we, one of the things that we do is we provide these free webinars. We try and do them every month, and hopefully you'll find today really helpful. So you might be wondering why there is a picture of a floating unicorn on your screen when we're talking about flexible work. But one of the things we say a lot at Strawberry Seed is that somebody is looking for a perfect, unique unicorn. And that may be they're looking for the right, they're recruiting and they're looking for a unique unicorn that just doesn't exist. And I think the same thing happens sometimes with flexible work. Both employees and employers think that there's this perfect form of work out there that is just, going to fix everything. And it's not always the case. And sometimes compromises need to be made. So I want you, as we're going through the content today, to think about the fact that sometimes as employers, we might have a response when someone asks for flexibility where we go, no, that's not how I saw it, or that's what I had in mind. But I think we need to adjust our expectations. And sometimes when there's a little bit of compromise from both sides, we can find a great middle ground that works for everybody. So I'm going to start off by talking about some of the advantages of offering flexibility at work. And the reason I want to do that is I think a lot of the time, particularly employers, can focus on the negatives and the inconveniences that might come when you have an employee who is suddenly requesting to work flexibly. So I want to really concentrate at first on the advantages of actually offering flexible work to your team, whether they're legally entitled to it or they're just seeking out some flexibility for themselves. So the first one is improved work-life balance. Because when you can work flexibly, often employees are able to manage their personal and professional responsibilities a lot better, and it removes a lot of stress from their lives. So sometimes having that ability to be a little bit flexible in how you work can mean you can get things done that you need to get done to make your life work more efficiently, and that can improve overall well-being. It can increase productivity. So, an employee may not work at their best between 9 and 5. Everyone's different. Different people work best at different times. Some people are really productive in the morning and some in the afternoons. Some actually quite productive in a work sort of office environment. Others might work better in a cafe or in a home office where it's really quiet. So offering flexibility can allow employees to actually be their most productive because they can work in a way that works best for them. It also is really, I think this, to me, this is one of the most important ones, is it can really, offering flexible work can really increase an employee's satisfaction and therefore retention of employees. We are in a tough marketplace and have been for a little while. And, employees really highly value flexible work. And if you offer flexible work, that can lead to higher job satisfaction and increase loyalty to a company. That, of course, will reduce turnover, and that can actually reduce costs because it's actually really expensive to find new employees. When, I think the pandemic over the last couple of years has showed us that a lot of jobs can be done with flexibility and maybe be done at home or done in a different way than what they were traditionally done in the past. And I certainly saw that. I was recruiting in early 2022, and I was finding employees or potential employees that were applying for roles with Strawberry Seed because we offer full flexibility. And a lot of those candidates were actually people who were happy with their job, but they were now being told they must come back to the office, and they'd actually really enjoyed working with flexibility and working from home. And once they were being told to come back from the office, they started looking for other jobs that might offer them that. Unfortunately for me, in two of those cases, I actually made offers to people, and when they went back to resign, their employer suddenly changed their mind and managed to say, oh, actually, we'll let you now stay and work flexibly, because they didn't want to lose that employee. So, really, that's a real life example of how easy it is to lose somebody if you don't offer them the flexibility that they're looking for. Obviously, flexibility is going to increase the talent pool of people available to you. If you're offering remote work, you can attract talent from a much wider geographic area right around Australia. The last person that we hired at Strawberry Seed, actually, she is up last person, second last person. She's based in Queensland, and she applied for the role. And I looked at her the same way I did anyone else. And it really made no difference to me, because I have someone in WA, I have someone in Melbourne. Most of us are based around Geelong and the Surf Coast, but we work with clients all over Australia. So for us, having someone in Queensland doesn't make a difference whatsoever. In fact, she has only been to our office once, and that was for our 10-year anniversary last year. And it wasn't even a work day, it was a day of fun. So, it really can open up a bigger talent pool for you, including people who actually cannot physically commute to an office location due to a disability or some other factor. So it really does offer, maybe a wider skill set than what you have available. And cost savings, I mean, they're there through reduced overheads. We have a team of 9, but we only fit 4 in our office. We're in a shared office space. If we do have more people in, which is very rare, we can spill out into a bigger space. But most of the time, we rarely have 4 people in the office. So you can save a lot of expenses on facilities and things like that. But it also reduces things like turnover and absenteeism, which is a cost savings for a business. Flexible work can really increase the ability of some people to join the workforce, which can really increase the diversity and inclusion. So having people who might be caregivers or have a disability or other unique circumstances that may make it difficult for them to participate in the workforce is suddenly opened up when you're willing to offer flexible work. Now, there are environmental benefits. That's not important to everybody. For some it is. For myself, it certainly is. When you don't have as many people on the road every day, whether it's that or having, less energy consumption from more people in the office, there's a lot of benefits to the environment. One that probably got really brought to the forefront in 2020 is business continuity. Now, when you work flexibly and you have flexible work arrangements for your team, businesses can actually really maintain operations a lot easier. Now, prior to 2020, a lot of businesses weren't in a position to quickly adapt to people working from home. So it really took the pandemic for that to change. Now, for Strawberry Seed, when we in March 2020, we moved 3 meetings from in-person to online. All of my team was set up to work from home and work flexibly. So really, it didn't disrupt our business, other than the fact that we had hundreds of employers ringing us for advice. But a lot of businesses really struggled to continue operations when they had that unexpected change of circumstances. So, there is a lot of benefit to being able to have employees work flexibly. One of our team, her husband, not too long ago, he works in the city, he works flexibly, he works sometimes at home and sometimes in the office. There were some issues with the train system in Melbourne, and they just got a message in the morning saying everyone just work from home today. And they can do that because their whole workforce is set up to do that. Now, I understand that this is not possible for every job in every business, but there are some advantages if you do have the opportunity to do that. And just the ability to adapt. I mean, we live in a digital world. Certainly those that are entering the workforce now and into roles that are office based, or, certainly, I mean, there's a big difference between a tradesman that has to be out on site versus someone who would otherwise be sitting in an office at a computer every day. There is an expectation from those entering the workforce now, and particularly after the last few years, that, there will be flexibility and an ability to maybe work from home sometimes and work, with technology that allows you to work anywhere. So, I think being set up to offer some flexibility, and I'm not talking necessarily meaning full flexibility, but some sort of flexibility where it's possible for team members, is definitely an advantage for your business. So what you're probably here for, though, is to hear about the legal requirements, and that is what I'm going to get into now. So it's important to understand that some employees in Australia do have a legal right to request flexible working arrangements under the Fair Work Act. And these form part of the National Employment Standards. Now, there is a difference between a flexible work request and working flexibly. So what do I mean by that? A flexible work request is a formal request to adjust an employee's working conditions, either ongoing or for a set period of time. Whereas working flexibly may include a wide range of formal and informal things and practices in a workplace. That could be having time off in lieu, and working extra time other days, overtime, working from home on occasion, things that can allow flexibility for employees and employers. And they're not necessarily legally mandated, but there are things that make a workplace more flexible and, I guess, more appealing to people. So I'm going to start off by talking about the more formal legal requirements and who must be considered for flexible work. And anyone that's attended one of our webinars would know that we do need to look at the three levels of how our employment laws work in this country. So the first level is the National Employment Standards, and they form part of the Fair Work Act. Now, these are the minimum employment conditions for every single employee in Australia, and flexible work is part of the National Employment Standards. The next level in our system is an industrial instrument. Now, that may be an award, it may be an enterprise level agreement, and some awards and enterprise agreements do have provisions around flexible work, and it's important to understand if there are any that do apply for your industry, particularly if they're above and beyond what's in the National Employment Standards. And the third level is a contractual arrangement. Sometimes employers do put flexible work information into contracts of employment. That means that you're locking that in and agreeing to it. So it is important that we do reflect things that in writing. So it's important to look at all of these three things when you are considering whether or not to offer flexibility to ensure you're meeting your legal requirements. So flexible work's not a new thing. The Fair Work Act and the National Employment Standards have included flexible work requests since it first came in 2010, but they have evolved over time. And the latest lot of changes happened in June last year, where there's been some additional things added in, and additional eligibility added in for some different categories of employees who can also request flexible work now. So an employer does have obligations under the Fair Work Act before they can refuse a request from an employee for flexible working arrangements. Now, I'll get into who's eligible in a moment, but if you're just going to say yes, then it's probably not an issue anyway, because if someone comes to you and says, can I work flexibly, and you're happy to do it, then that's not an issue. The issue sort of comes up in terms of if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'd like some flexible work arrangements, and you may want to consider whether or not you're going to offer that. So employers have to consult with their employee and make a genuine effort to accommodate that request, and only refuse if it's on reasonable business grounds. And we'll get into detail about this in a moment. And the employer must respond in writing within 21 days of that request, with an explanation on the business grounds that they're using for refusal, or any other changes that they're willing to make or not make. And if they're refusing, they do need to also provide information referring to the dispute resolution process through Fair Work. And one of the new things that also came in June was the Fair Work Commission. The FWC is the Fair Work Commission, can hear and make orders on any disputes on flexible work arrangements when the employee and employer can't resolve that at a workplace level. So let's get into it a little bit more. Who is actually eligible? So there's a few new categories that have been added since midway through last year. People over the age of 55 can make flexible work requests. People living with a disability, someone who is pregnant, people caring for infants or school-aged children, someone who is a carer, and there are definitions of carers, but it's generally someone who is the primary carer of someone, whether they've got special needs or an elderly parent or something like that. And a new addition as well last year was someone experiencing family and domestic violence, or someone who was caring for someone in those circumstances. Now, if a full-time or part-time employee is entitled to make a request if they fall into one of those eligible categories, if they have completed at least 12 months of continuous service with their employer immediately before making that request. So, someone who's only been with you for 3 months, they can come in and ask, but you don't have that legal obligation to meet, the standards that we set out around considering their request. Of course, if you're happy to go along with it, you're more than entitled to do so. But it also does apply to casual employees. They can make a request if they've been working for the same employer regularly and systematically for at least 12 months. And there's a reasonable expectation of that employment continuing on a regular and systematic basis. I have had conversations with people where they've gone, well, they're a casual employee, I don't want to give them flexibility. Well, I don't have to give them any more shifts. But if they're meeting that criteria of regular and systematic for a period of 12 months, it would be to your detriment and quite risky to not go through the same process as you would for a permanent employee, because, they'd have a pretty strong claim if you took any action against them because they had made that request. And an adverse action claim is something that would be on the table for them to take with Fair Work. So, all formal requests for flexible working arrangements should be in writing. And I think that applies whether it's something that is meeting the criteria under the NES or whether it's someone outside of that. If an employee comes to you and says, hey, I'd really love to change my working arrangements to be more flexible, ask them to put it in writing to you. Ask them to detail what it is that they're looking for, and let them know that you'll review their request and respond in writing in 21 days. As I said, I would do that whether or not it comes under the NES categories or not, because that gives you time to actually sit back and assess it. Sometimes your first gut reaction may not be where you end up. So it's much better to have them put it in writing, and then you know that you're both on the same page about what you're assessing. When it's just a conversation, not everyone will remember it in the same way. So even if you've had a conversation with the employee, say to them, look, that's fine, go away, put it in writing to me, send me an email with exactly what you're looking for, and I'll review it and I'll come back to you in writing and let you know what our decision is. So every time someone asks you, even if you're going to say yes, it's always good to have that paper trail to show that it was a request and how you responded to it. So what can an employer request? Well, there's a lot of variations they can request, but usually it's a change in working hours. So they might be asking to reduce their hours. They might be asking to adjust their start or finish times. They might be wanting to change the pattern of work, so the days that they work. They might be looking to do job sharing with someone else, or to work a split shift for a particular reason. And it may be a change in location. So that could include working from home, but also if you have multiple locations for your business, they might be requesting to change their work location because they're eligible to make that request. So the biggest question we got in the pre-registration survey was, what are reasonable business grounds to say no to a request for flexible work? So an employer may only refuse a request on reasonable business grounds after they have taken several steps. So you can't just say, no, I've got business grounds, no. You have to discuss that request with the employee. Once they've sent it to you, if you need more information, sit down and talk to them about it. Ask them why. Why, if they haven't given you that information, get into the nitty-gritty of why they're actually wanting that change. What's the thing that's motivating it? You genuinely need to try and reach agreement with them. And I think it's important to note that you don't just have to do what they ask. So an employee comes to you, and we'll get in this in a little bit more shortly, but just because they've asked for something doesn't mean that, it's black and white, that's yes or no. It may be, look, I can't give them what they're looking for, but there's some alternatives that we could probably look at that might meet halfway in the middle. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But you should definitely look at those alternatives, and it's always going to be in your favor to look at alternatives rather than just a flat no. But you also need to consider the consequences for the employee for refusing the request. So if you don't have all the information, you may not understand what the consequences may be, because it may be a case of, if this employee if they're eligible to request under NES and they're putting in a reasonable request, and if you say no, it's going to mean they've got to leave their job or something else. And you don't have really strong business grounds for making that, then you could find yourself in trouble if it does go to dispute down the track. So really, there may be instances where the consequences for the employee are going to outweigh a little bit about the consequences for the employer. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. So what actually counts as reasonable business grounds for refusal? So you need to look at the individual circumstances. And I know everybody would love us to go, okay, it's X, Y, and Z, or it's A, B, C, that it's really black and white, but it's not. It's always going to be a combination of all of the circumstances. So the first thing is the nature and size of your business. The smaller your business, the more likely it'll be upheld that you say no if it's reasonable business grounds. There's only 4 people in your business. One person reducing their hours by half might not be something that's doable. Whereas the larger your business, the more likely it is that you're going to have to sort of make some adjustments and find some way to, if you're a large corporate, then, it'd have to be a really strong case for you to not offer someone flexibility if you've got 30 people doing the role. And also the nature of the business. I mean, let's be honest, a tradesman whose job is to go out to people's houses and fix appliances is going to find it very difficult to work from home. Their job, just the nature, their employees' role and their duties is just not going to be feasible. But if you're someone whose job is to sit at a computer for most of the day and answer phones or do video meetings and things like that, there may not be a requirement that you have to be doing it at a certain time or at a certain location. So those things will be taken into consideration. And of course, what has actually been requested, like how reasonable is what is being requested. I have seen I know some people may come across like strawberry seeds, like, we're all about the employee. It's absolutely not true. I think it's a two-way street. And, I've seen some really unreasonable things requested by an employee. And so, you can say no to something that's just not feasible to work. But it's important to go, okay, well, what is it they're trying to achieve? What is it that's motivating them to make this request? And is there some way we can meet in the middle and look at alternatives rather than just say no? So when is it reasonable to say no? So what does reasonable business grounds mean? Look, it's not clearly defined, but there's kind of 4 areas that you look at. So cost. So, is what the employee has requested, will those arrangements just cost too much for the employee? Like I literally have to hire someone else. It's just not there. It's not feasible for me to do that. That they're asking you to set them up at home and you have to buy all this new equipment. And again, you're a tiny business. That's not going to be something that's, necessarily feasible. Capacity. So is there the capacity within the business to change the working arrangement of other employees to accommodate that request? So, what are the consequences of that arrangement? Now, again, in a large corporate, it's going to be a lot easier to find ways of rearranging work and things like that. Whereas if you're a small team, that may be a lot harder to do. The practicality, it would be impractical to just have an expectation, oh, well, you'll go hire someone else to do part of my job. So again, that's not necessarily going to be something that's feasible. But I also think you need to look at it in terms of it might be something that ends up working for your business. So I've seen some great examples where someone said, look, I really do want to go part-time. Oh, I've got young children and I want to go part-time. And often that happens when someone's returning from parental leave. It's very, very common for when someone's returning from parental leave for them to want flexible work. And there may be an opportunity, particularly if there's several members. Say, for example, we're talking about a receptionist, there may be several members of your administration team. It might be actually feasible to have someone job share and have another person come on board, which gives you more flexibility in how you've got coverage. There might be some advantages for the business, but it's not expected that you just have to move mountains to make it happen. And the other thing is the impact on efficiency and productivity, or on customer service. So if the arrangements are going to severely impact those aspects of the business, then that could be reasonable business grounds to say no. I think you need to really think about it in detail, though, and that's why I say take a breath. When someone puts a request to you in writing, you don't have to just respond immediately. You're allowed to say, look, I need to go away and consider it. I need to think about all the circumstances and what we can or can't do. Many years ago, actually, before the Fair Work Act, I worked in construction, in commercial construction, and we had a role of a contract administrator that would work on multiple projects. So say a contract administrator might work on one project 2 days a week and another one 3 days a week. And we had a contract administrator coming back from parental leave, and she wanted to come back part-time. And the manager said, you can't come back part-time. There's no way we can have someone part-time. And I said, hang on, take a breath for a second, because if we've got people that work several days on one project and several days on another, then surely one person can just work several days on one project. Like, that would have been in today's rules. There's no way they could have got away with saying no to that, because it doesn't make any sense, because it's very practical for that to work. Whereas there's other roles where there's an expectation if that person's customer facing and the only person in that role, and they need to be there 5 days a week, they need to be there 5 days a week. So it is looking at all the circumstances before saying no. A big one is, do I have to agree to everything the employee asks for? And often I think that's where people panic when they get a request for flexible work. They think, oh my God, I can't do what they've asked. What do I do? And I think it's important to take a breath and go, actually, is there a middle ground? Can I look at alternative that might work for the employee as well as the employer? And that happens a lot when someone's coming back. They might have in their mind what works for them. That may not work for the business, but there might be something else that does. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples that kind of cover off a couple of different sort of questions that we get come up on a regular basis, and scenarios we see quite often. And hopefully it'll help you sort of think about how you might approach any of these situations should they come your way. So the first one, Betty's requesting to work part-time, 3 hours per day, 5 days a week when she returns from parental leave. So Betty's been on parental leave. You've been keeping in touch with her while she's on parental leave. We're going to do a webinar on parental leave later this year. But she's indicated before she's gone on leave that, yes, she's definitely want to go be part-time when she returns. I think you've also got to be really careful that just because someone has told you what they think they want to do before they head off on parental leave doesn't mean that's going to be what they want to do when they return. Their circumstances could change a lot in that 12 months, particularly if it's their first baby. And as a mother of 3, I know I was in different circumstances with each of mine returning to work. I was back after 3 months with my first one, and I wasn't even working with my third one. So, whilst you might have had conversations, you can't take that as gospel. So just before, a month before Betty returns to work, you've had a conversation with her, caught up with her for a coffee, and she said, this is what I think I would like to do when I come back. And you let her know that you're going to go away and assess it. Now, 3 hours per day, 5 days a week might not work for your business. Maybe it does, but if it doesn't, it may be that you go, look, 15 hours a week can work for us. Absolutely, we're happy for someone to work 15 hours a week. But doing it over 5 days, 3 hours a day, it's just not going to work with, how we roster. But what might work is 3 days of 5 hours or 2 days of 7.5 hours. Either of those scenarios would work for us. So we're happy for Betty to do 15 hours, just not 5 days of 3 hours. So then you can go back to Betty and say, okay, what you've requested doesn't work. We can't make that work for these reasons. However, here's a couple of alternatives. Why don't you go away and consider them and see whether any of these work for you? So, there's a discussion, there's communication, and you may find that you find a nice middle ground that works for her and works for you, and then you can move forward. These are very generic examples, by the way, because it's very hard to get specific because there's so many nuances and circumstances. And in any of these, scenarios, you are more than welcome if you have these circumstances, and clients contact us all the time and we have these conversations. Particularly as a third party who doesn't have any emotional investment, we have the ability to step back and go, okay, what actually is practical and what isn't, and talk through with you and allow you to have the discussion with us about whether or not, about your concerns, so before you talk to the employee about them. So our second example is Bill. Bill works full-time. And he's got a son that's starting kinder. And so he's come and requested that he wants to start work at 10 a.m. for 3 days a week to take his son to kinder for the next 12 months. Now, you've looked at it and you're like, yeah, I'm okay with that. The problem is one of the days that Bill wants to do that is Wednesday. And on a Wednesday, there's a 9:30 a.m. meeting every Wednesday that people all across Australia in Bill's position have to attend. So it's not something that can be easily changed because, it's an around Australia kind of thing with your business. And there's, Bill's got to drop his son off at 9 o'clock and it's going to take him till 10 o'clock to get into the office. So, Wednesdays is not going to work. So, so there's a few different alternatives you might look at. So you could go back to Bill and say, listen, we can't do Wednesdays. Or another alternative may be, listen, well, after you've talked to Bill, you've found out that actually Bill's only like 2 minutes from his son's kinder. It's literally around the corner. So if he drops his son at kinder, if he worked from home on a Wednesday, he could be home by 9:30, well and truly, and start at 9:30 on a Wednesday, but work from home that day. So that could be an alternative as well. So again, it doesn't have to be exactly what he's requested, but there are ways to work around it. Or maybe you once you talk to Bill, he says, oh, actually, well, I can change the days with my wife and we'll work that out. But, it could be something that's working from home. That could also be a solution. So the third one, Florence is pregnant. She's one of your employees. She's been with you a couple of years. She's pregnant, but she's suffering from very severe morning sickness. And I have a lot of sympathy for Florence because I was really sick with each of my pregnancies very early on. But for some people, that can last quite a long way through, and in fact, through the whole pregnancy. So Florence has come to you and said, look, I think I just need to work from home for the rest of my pregnancy. Now, there's a number of things that are going to have to be considered in this type of situation. First of all, is it possible for Florence to do her job at home? Now, if Florence worked for me, it would be absolutely 100% fine for Florence to work at home 100% for the rest of her pregnancy. But even in those circumstances, I would still be saying to her, realistically, how much work are you going to be able to get done? Like how, she might say, look, it's every morning I'm really sick, but if I can rest in the morning, I can usually get a couple of hours work done in the afternoon. So maybe it's a case of like, hey, we reduce her hours. The expectation is only so many hours in the afternoon, but we now give her work that she can only, it doesn't matter if she doesn't do them at any specific time of the day. She doesn't have to attend face-to-face meetings with clients. We change the type of work she's doing so that she can do it whenever it works for her. But it also may mean that you do ask for more information from her doctor as well, because Florence might be wanting to work, but she's actually physically, she shouldn't be. She should be resting. And anyone that attended our February webinar on personal leave or has watched that, we talk a lot about different illnesses and things like that, and how you might handle those. And it's always better to be working from medical information when we're talking about an illness or an injury. So, it may be really workable, or it may be that she's in a position that it's just not workable at all. So you'd really want to be relying to avoid discrimination or issues with, the NES flexible work arrangement request from a pregnant employee. You want to be getting as much information as possible and working with her to try and make the best decision for you, but also for her. Because it's fine to say she can work from home, but if she's physically, if she needs to do 4 hours work a day and she can physically only do 2, then she's not going to be meeting the inherent requirements of her job. So that would be a little bit of a complex one. But I guess I put it in there because I want you to realise that it's not just cut and dried, and sometimes there's a number of things to consider. Ernie would like to change his hours because his daughter has recently been in a domestic violence situation. She's now split with her partner, and he needs to help his daughter with his grandchildren. Now, this is a new requirement or I guess eligibility for flexible work requests. And here's a really good example of one where there's not a lot of control in this situation. It's kind of a case of, you know, if you've got someone whose daughter's just been, you know, had to be relocated and she just needs the help now, she needs the help now. That's a life situation that is very little control there. So you might not have to be a lot more flexible in this circumstance to kind of try and accommodate. Now, if Ernie does a job where he can make up his hours at different times and do other things, it might be a lot easier. If it's not possible, if Ernie's a tradie that needs to be on site every day, then it may be that you have to reduce his hours for a period of time, and you allow him to do that. It may be that he takes a leave of absence for a period of time if that's going to work better. This is a circumstance where you need to communicate and really find out as much information as possible, and probably need to be more flexible at the employer end. And this might be a situation that's not long term either. This might be something where he says, look, for the next month, I just really need to be there to help her and get everything sorted. And so, you know, you need to work with him in this circumstance, and really you know, you'd be very hard pressed to say no. Without some very significant, and if it's absolutely just not tenable whatsoever for him to have any flexibility, it may be just providing him with leave for him to do what he needs to do. But you know, it's going to be a circumstance that will come up at some point. I haven't seen one yet, but we have had a few domestic violence leave in the last year or two since the new leave has been brought in. And, you know, it's a circumstance that's kind of outside people's control in many ways. So, you know, it's something that you do need to be a little bit more reactive to, as opposed to someone who's giving you the option of, hey, this is what I'd like to do. You know, Bill's giving you 2 months notice that he'd like to do that for the next 12 months is different to that scenario. And finally, Brian. Brian has a chronic health issue that means he can no longer work full time. Now, if Brian's over 55, he is absolutely within his rights to make a request in this nature. Again, he also may be that this is considered a disability now because it's a chronic condition that's not going to improve in the future. Usually when someone's got a chronic health issue, there's been a long time before it gets to this scenario but it's good that they're talking to you. You also need to be aware that there's discrimination on people with a disability, so you've got to be very careful on how you make decisions in a circumstance where there's a health issue involved. So in this scenario, it may be that Brian's not actually sure exactly how that can look, and it will be working with him again, maybe talking to his medical practitioner, writing them letters and things. We talked about this quite a bit in the personal leave one as well. Again, so there's some information there if you want to go back and watch that one. But whenever there's sort of a health issue involved, it's really good to base it on medical information and facts. If it comes to the fact that Brian, you know, it's not possible for him to actually work flexibly for whatever business reason, you know, it might come down to whether he can meet the inherent requirements of the job, but you really want to have shown that you've really explored all options before you just said no in that circumstance. So one of the things a lot of people don't think about is having a trial period. So whether it's a national employment standard eligibility or not, sometimes you're just not sure whether something will work. You know, that someone's said, here's what I want to do. And you're like, oh, we've never done this before. I don't know how that will work. I don't know if this person will work well from home, or, you know, whether working those reduced hours will work for the business. You can ask to trial it. You can say to the person, listen, I'm not sure whether this is going to work, but how about we trial it for the next 4 weeks, and so we can both see whether this works for both parties. You might experiment a bit. You might try some different things. One of my team came to me, I think it started last year, and said, look, I'm just, you know, she had 4 kids, and, you know, the hours and days of school and kinder and things were changing. And she said, I'm not coping at the moment. I feel like I need to make an adjustment, but I don't know whether because she was 4 days a week, she didn't know whether she wanted to reduce her hours for each of those 4 days, or whether she wanted to drop to 3 days a week. So my suggestion to her was, why don't you work 2 weeks, 3 days a week, and then work the next 2 weeks at 4 days with reduced hours, and see which one suits you better. Because I can offer that to her. I was able to see how it worked. She was able to see how it worked. And after that, we decided which one she was going to do moving forward. You can do that in any circumstances. So if you're not sure whether it can work, you can say to the employee, even if they're eligible under NES, can we trial this for 4 weeks? Because I let's see if it'll work. And if you do that, and it really will be in your favor if it doesn't work, because not only will you show that you have considered it and tried it, but you'll have a pretty strong business case based on the results on why it didn't work. Productivity dropped, things weren't done, there was problems, so you'll be able to say, look, we gave it a go and it didn't work, so here's the reasons we're saying no. So don't be afraid of trying a trial period, but you do want to put it in writing. You do want to be really clear on the process and that when the end date is and what the assessment will be and what will happen if it doesn't continue on. We can certainly help you with that, but it is worthwhile maybe trying a few different options to see what works for everyone. I've seen times when the employee says a week in, says, this is not working, it's not working for me, I thought this would work and it's not working. So it's a two-way street, but it is something you can do, but you want to do it in a really thoughtful manner, and you also want to always do it in writing. So if you refuse, if you do say no, can it be challenged? The answer is yes. One of the changes that came in last year was that Fair Work Commission can now hear disputes around flexible work requests. So if within the workplace you just can't resolve it, and either you say no and the employee doesn't agree with you and thinks that it can work, or you don't respond within 21 days, once the employee has made a request in writing, then the employee can take that to the Fair Work Commission. Now, there's a couple of ways that the Commission can deal with it. So they can do sort of they can start with a mediation or conciliation session, which is a little bit like the first step of an unfair dismissal, where they sit down with both parties and try and help them come to a resolution. It may go to arbitration, which is where you're sitting in front of a magistrate who can rule on something, and that ruling can include an order from Fair Work to say, no, you must give this to the employee. So now, do I think that's going to happen in many things? No, I don't. I don't think that's going to be a very something that happens a lot, but it is now an option for it to be for them to adjudicate on it. So, I think if you're communicating well and you've done your best and you've said no, but you can show a strong business case, you will be in a good position if the employee just, is being unreasonable about it and decides to take it further. And so that's why we want you to go through all those steps. You don't want to move too quickly. You want to take your time to respond. You want to really think it through and really look at all the different options. So that if it does for some reason get to an arbitration, you're able to go, well, here's all the evidence of everything we tried. It just didn't work. It just doesn't work for our business. We're a small business, whatever the reason is. And, you're not going to get an order you have to do something unreasonable in your business. And I think this is going to happen more in larger organisations that make snap decisions. So there was a few questions that actually came through the registrations, and so I have pulled some out and tried to answer them as best I can. I may not be every single one in there, but hopefully I've picked ones that I think will cover a lot of people's questions. So the first one is, what are your obligations when an employee asks you to work from home when they're unwell? Not the first time I've heard this question. My first question back to an employer is always, what are the actual circumstances? For example, I did my ankle last year, and I had lots of problems that I couldn't drive for a period of time. Then I had surgery, but I could work. I couldn't drive into the office. So if an employee is in that circumstance, it's actually, if it's possible for the employee to work from home. Again, we talked about this in the personal leave webinar as well, but if it's possible for that person to work at home, great. It's a great solution for both of you. For a period of time, they're unable to drive, they can't get into work, they can work from home. They're set up to do it, great, easy. It's a temporary solution. But are they actually sick? If someone is saying, I am not well enough to come into the office because I'm feeling really unwell, should they actually be working at home? If they're unfit to attend work, should they be not working at all? I think you need to use your discretion. Look, my team are adults and I treat them like adults. So with my team, if they say, hey, I'm not feeling great this morning, I might have a bit of a nap, but I might do a few hours this afternoon. My response is always, if you feel like you need the day, take the day. set your out of office. If you feel a bit better later and you do some hours, great. If you end up making up your hours during the week, fantastic. If you don't, just put it into sick leave. That's always my response. But I also say, I don't want you working if you just need to rest. But sometimes you're just feeling, you've got a bit of a sniffle and whatever else. But as an employer, if we're set up to work remotely, we all work remotely always. If it's not something you have as a standard thing, if that person is not working from home regularly or never works from home, but then suddenly rings you and goes, I'm going to work from home today, that's not their choice to do so. If they're not well enough to come in and attend work when they normally would, now, if you agree with them and have a conversation with them and say, look, I'm more than happy for you to work at home today, that's different, but they don't get to decide that they get paid for that day. You can say, well, if you're not well enough to come into the office, then you're not well, you shouldn't be working. I don't expect you to work. You'll take a personal leave day. So again, case by case, use your discretion, but the employee doesn't get to make that decision if it's not normally how they work. They don't just get to unilaterally make that decision. And sometimes you find yourself in a circumstance where it's kind of become normal behavior and you might have to reset some boundaries with some employees. Can my employee work on a public holiday and then have a day in lieu? This comes up a lot, particularly now around Australia Day. Not everybody wants to take Australia Day anymore. So you've got to start with your industrial instrument. What does your award or enterprise agreement say? If you have one, if you're award free, then great, then, that's fine. That's just a choice you make as an employer. But there's a lot of awards that actually have something in them. So I've picked an example of the Health Professionals and Support Services Award, just because the percentage of allied health that we're attending the session today. But, there is a clause in that award, 33.3, substitution of a public holiday by agreement. An employer and employee may agree to substitute another day for a day that would otherwise be a public holiday under the NES or a part day. Most awards have this now, I understand. Like, I can't say that I've read every single award, so I will always tell you, if you haven't checked your award, check it first. But if you've got that clause in the award, then you're well within your rights to agree. Now, by agree, I would not be directing an employee ever. I mean, you might say to them, hey, would you mind working it and taking another day? And if they're happy with that, I would send them an email saying, hey, just so we're clear, you don't mind working that day? And they might say, yeah, no, I'd much prefer to take another day. If the employee requests it, ask them to request it in writing to you. More often than not, I would say the higher risk is you asking someone to work, because that may be seen as, well, I didn't have a choice. Whereas if an employee says to you, hey, I'd like to work that day and take a different day off, ask them to put it right into you and say, yep, no, not a problem whatsoever. So there's probably more risk if you say it, because whilst you might be thinking you're requesting it, they might be thinking you're telling them they have no choice. I'm actually really clear about it in our leave policy. I actually have in there that I'm really happy for people to substitute public holidays. So it's really good to include that in your award, in your policies, if you are happy to do that. And just let employers know, just request it and that will be fine. But yeah, you've got to be careful. I'm going to talk in a minute about directing versus requesting, but it is absolutely possible to do it, but I would probably only do it if the employee requests it. So this was an interesting one. How do you manage when an employee's hours fluctuate weekly? I'm going to make an assumption with this question that someone would only be asking this if it's not working for the business, that the employee's hours are fluctuating. And I'm going to also make a guess that the reason they're fluctuating and it's a problem is because there weren't clear expectations and boundaries set at the beginning between the employee and employer on what flexible work looked like. And that happens a lot. Sometimes people go, oh, well, we work flexibly. But what does that actually mean? I don't know anyone that has massive, just even at Strawberry Sea, where we're really flexible, it's not flexible to the point of there's no expectations. There is an expectation that you will work your hours every week. Or, I'm really happy if someone says to me, hey, do you mind if I work one less day this week and one more next week? That's fine. But they usually check. It's, I treat them like adults, but there's a two-way street there. We have our normal ordinary working hours every week, which we use for public holidays and annual leave. I trust my team to manage them themselves. But part of that expectation is that they let people know when they're in or not in. We all have access to each other's calendar, so we can see when someone's in. Our expectation is I don't just ring my employee and expect them to be answering the phone. I might send them a quick Slack message and say, hey, are you available? But we see a lot of people get into trouble when they're not clear, because they say it's flexible, but then their expectations are, hey, I should be able to pick up the phone and call you at any stage between these hours and you should answer. So if you find yourself going, hey, I don't know what hours this person's working, then that's a conversation that needs to be had to have a little bit of a reset on what are the expectations on when you are available and when you're working. What's the process or boundaries about when and when, if is it, I don't care when you work, or is it actually the expectation is that you should be around? And if you're not going to be around, you set you're out of office or you let people know. Both parties need to be aware of what the rules and boundaries are. So that might be a reset conversation, that one. Can an employer ask employees to change their working days or hours? Employers can request an employee to change their employment conditions at any time, but conditions of employment can only be changed by mutual agreement. And mutual agreement means both parties are happy with the outcome. There is a very big difference between requesting and directing. You need to be very careful. If you're going to someone and saying, look, I'd really, there's been some changes in the business and we'd like to propose some new options. Would you be open to changing your hours or days? Would this work for you? And the employee says, yeah, great, fantastic. As per our discussion, you're happy to move to these new hours, sign this, and we're all moving forward. But again, whenever you're instigating it, you've got to be careful, because the person might say, yep, okay, and then turn around and go, resign and say, oh, well, I had no choice, but because I didn't have a choice in that was just told to me. So how people perceive it too is really important. So yeah, you can always talk to an employee, and if they're happy to make adjustments and change their days or hours, and it works for them and it works for you, great. Always do it in writing. Always make sure that it's really clear that it was by a mutual agreement. But you can't just say, just because you want someone to change, if they don't want to, they do not have to. And if they choose not to, that might be a conversation about whether or not that's a change that must happen, and therefore there may be redundancies and sort of things involved. But you can ask, but you can't get upset if they say no, because that's what was previously agreed. Can I change a flexible work arrangement if the business circumstances change? Look, the same things are going to apply as when they first requested it. So if when you first, the circumstances have changed quite considerably since when you first agreed to it, you might have to sit down with them and say, listen, when we agreed to this, these were the circumstances. These are what have changed for the business. So it's no longer reasonable for the business to be able to accommodate this. You'd have to be very careful about it. And you'd have to be very clear on the circumstances and why it doesn't work. You would have to explore all the options that might be available to try and adjust for both parties. But again, they must agree to any change to a variation. It has to be agreed. It can't be directed. So I tread carefully on it, and you'd want to have some very clear reasoning why, what has changed and why that means it doesn't work anymore. But, work with them. Hopefully you can come to an agreement, and maybe talk to us before you have the conversation so that we can help you through it. I would consider putting a review date on any change in working arrangements, even ones that are NES eligible. There's nothing wrong with saying, if I take the example of Bill, whose son was going to kinder, you say, we've agreed to this variation to your hours for the next 12-month period that will expire on this date. And after that date, there is an expectation that you'll go back to your hours that, prior to that, unless another agreement is made. So you can put review dates in. It might, and it'll depend on the circumstances. So, if it's somebody who's having a change in circumstances because they're pregnant, well, it's for the duration of the rest of their pregnancy. When they return for work, then you're looking at what the new arrangement is. if it's, say, the example of the gentleman, the example we gave whose daughter's having their domestic violence circumstances, it might be saying, we're going to try this for the next month and then we'll reassess. But you can put those review dates in on those change. So that everybody's clear. And I think it's about everyone being clear that this is what we've agreed to for this period. And then if it doesn't work, we need to reassess. But I would be putting that in writing. So the last one I'm going to touch on is managing requests to work from home. We get this a lot. Now, I'm going to premise this by saying there are a lot of jobs that were successfully done from home during the pandemic. And anytime you're assessing someone now on, prior to 2020, I would, it was different. Now that jobs have been proven to be able to be done from home, many jobs were proven to be able to be done from home. If someone has successfully done that job from home from a period of time, there were no issues, and suddenly you're going, well, no, you have to come back to, you can't have that flexibility anymore. Aside for the issues that's going to cause with the employment relationship and the trust, you've got to take that into consideration because it's now proven that it could be done. So key considerations that I would take in for assessing whether it's viable for a new request for someone to work from home that has never done so before. Is their job suitable? Is it a job that can be done from home? Is it a job that they don't need to be in the office? They don't need to be, available to talk to people. They're not meeting with clients. They're, and again, we're not always talking all or nothing. It might be a lot of people are doing hybrid now, a few days in the office, a few days at home. That 2-3 mix is really popular now. And then, meetings are on certain days and everyone comes in that day, and then other days are flexible. But really job suitability has got to be your starting point. Performance and productivity. If you've got an employee who has shown they cannot work independently, that need that constant supervision, are constantly asking questions of people, and they maybe their productivity levels, there's a reason that they sit next to you in the office because that's the only reason why they're productive. You don't necessarily have to say yes. Again, we're talking outside of the NES eligibility, but even then that could be part of it is, well, you've proven that you can't be productive when you've worked from home in the past. Maybe during the pandemic they weren't as productive and it's boosted now that they're back. That's evidence you can use as to say why you've said no. Equipment and technology, certainly prior to 2020, we didn't have the flexibility. Now, my team were fine. They just switched to working from home immediately because we were all set up with laptops and home setups. Not everybody's like that. So, it's unrealistic if someone says, oh, well, I want to work from home, but they work from a desktop at work. Everything's on your server. Now, a lot of things are cloud-based nowadays. We can work from our phones if we have to, but not everybody's set up like that. So, having their ability to have the right technology and equipment at home is important. Another thing to consider would be data security. What's the work they're doing is, important that the work that they're doing is done on your server because of the type of work that they do, the type of confidential information that they're dealing with. That's something that can be taken into consideration. And the work environment. It's certainly important, I think, to at least know that the work setup they have at home is safe, and do they have a good chair to sit on? Are they got the right desk set up? You can ask them to take photos. There's certainly checklists that you can do to check, like, are they in a safe working environment, because you need to know that. But also things like if they're planning on working from the kitchen table. Now, I'm not talking about 2020 when people just had to make do and work out what worked. If someone's asking to regularly work from home, it's not unreasonable to say, well, where will you be working? What will that space be like? Will you be interrupted? Like if you're working if you've got housemates and you're going to have to work in the dining room table, and those housemates work shift work and they're walking through the kitchen while you're on a meeting, that's not a good work environment. That's not conducive to the type. If it depends, what type of work do you do? Are they on video calls? Are they not? The other thing is that working from home is not an alternative for childcare. So depending on if someone's trying to use it as an alternative for childcare, how old are their kids? Now, we're in school holidays here in Victoria right now. It is when people work from home, and my team do, they've got kids at home. Now, my team are working lots of different ways over, one of my team is taking 2 days annual leave this week, but she's actually still working 4 days, just working reduced hours each of those days around her son who's in his first year of school. some are taking a bit of time off, some are, working less days, but then the days they are working, they've got alternative care. But it's not as simple as to go, oh, well, I'm going to work from home 2 days a week and then I'm not going to put my kid in childcare, because if you've got a small child, you're not being able to, and that's going to mean you're not able to do your job, then it's not the right work environment. So it isn't an alternative to childcare. And that can be very clearly made as an expectation with employees. So what should you do as an employer? Consider the different types of flexibility that would work for your business. What will work for your business? What has worked in the past? If you've never done it before, like what would be the barriers that you see and how would you overcome them? It's better to have some of those thoughts before you get your first request. Implement a process for managing flexible work requests. So have a policy. For some reason, some people are scared to have a policy because, it'll make people ask for it. Like you're going to get this influx of everybody asking for flexible work if you set that up. That's not the case at all. You need people to know if someone comes to you and says, oh, I want to request flexible work, great, we've got a process on that. Go to the policy, read it, and the policy can set out, that you expect them to do it in writing, what you need to know in that. So it can actually help guide the process. Train your managers on flexible work requests. If you are not the only person someone would come to, make sure that all of the people that someone may go to are very aware of who can make those requests. Because if you've got, Foreman Joe, who's an old school guy who's down on the factory floor, and one of his guys comes to him and says, oh, I'm going to ask for flexible work, and he just says, get stuff, we don't do that. That could be a problem for you. So make sure they understand the process themselves and where to send them, which is why having a policy is great. So implement policies if you don't have them, or make a review of them. Some of the principles of a good, fair, flexible working policy: it should be mutually beneficial. It should be clear that it's got to suit both the employee and employer. What a reasonable request might look like, you might give examples, but also say that each individual situation is different. Senior leaders should model an approach to flexible work. If you want to offer flexible work in your workplace, then model what that looks like. Let employees see how you do it, because then they'll follow suit. As I said, people lead managers really do need to be trained so that they can be sensitive and avoid any potential conflict because they've handled it badly. And consider the eligibility. It doesn't just, you could have just per the NES, but, why restrict it? There might be lots of different reasons why people want to work flexibly, and you should be open to it, because I think there are a lot of advantages to it if the work that you do is suited to it. So finally, just a couple of quick tips on managing employees who work flexibly, because I've been doing it for 11 years. Set clear expectations and boundaries for work. If they know what's expected of them, they know when they should be expected at work, it removes potential conflict. Encourage your employees to set boundaries between work and home if they are working from home. Make sure that they do unplug. I mean, certainly the right to disconnect is going to be coming in. As an employer, you need to, there's times that I work on a weekend, but if I send my employees something on a weekend, they all know that there's zero expectation that they're going to have to respond to that, because that's just when I'm choosing on working. I'm not expecting them to respond. And you want them to have a boundary between work and home. Maintain that open communication. And that might mean that, you have to implement new systems. We use Slack. It's a great tool for us with us all working remotely. It allows us to sort of check in and say, hey, are you available for a call right now? But, you might have to make more of an effort as a manager to communicate because you're not seeing each other all the time. Provide all the necessary resources. What do they need to do their job? Make sure they've got it. Even if they're working flexibly, if they're working from home, make sure they've got the stationery and everything they need. Make sure they've got the resources they need if you're going to provide that as an option. Make adjustments if things aren't working. It doesn't have to be static. If something's not working, talk about it. Come up with a new solution. Make adjustments. Focus on the outcomes. Honestly, that's my biggest one. If you're focused on the outcomes and that someone's doing the work and they're being productive, does it really matter if they're not doing it in the exact same way you are, or the exact same way someone else on the team is? If they're doing it in a way, I've got team members that like to set their day structured like they are in an office. Personally, I work better when I kind of work for about an hour or so and then I duck out. If I'm working from home, I'll put a load of washing on and I'll work for another hour or so and then I'll go hang it out. That's how I work better. I also have ADHD. That works for me. It breaks up my day. So it's really important that you set it up in the right way. Don't try to apply one size fits all because it's not going to work the same exactly for everybody. And just address any concerns or challenges promptly as they come up, and then essentially lead by example, show them what it should look like. So that is it for the presentation. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A box. I'd be more than happy to answer anything that you have now. But just so you're aware, we do have some upcoming public training. So, first of all, our next two webinars are 101 of HR for physiotherapists coming up in May with Francis. And then Francis and myself will be running our June webinar, which is going to be on award increases for 2024, what you need to know. We have it sort of mid-June in the hope that we have all the information by then of what the increases are going to be. We talk a lot about how to run boot tests, how to check that you're paying correctly, how to classify in awards and things like that. So that's a really popular one that we do this sort of every year, but we update it every year with what's current. We have some mental health first aid training on our books. If you visit the training courses page on our website, there's a lot of information there on upcoming courses and information on how to book, as well as leadership training. I'm traveling around the country a bit this year. Again, we got Brisbane, Perth, Sydney, Adelaide and Melbourne. Our first Melbourne one is in May, and then there's sort of across the year. So all the information is on our website. And if you want any more information, you can always reach out. You can also find us on all the socials. We post lots of information about what's happening in employment law, about those changes. We some interesting articles about recent cases or things that are happening that you should know as an employer. On Instagram, we post some funny stuff if we need to. But ultimately, there's a lot of information out there. But if anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you now. But as always, if you would prefer to ask more specific questions of our team, you can always reach out to any of the Strawberry Seed team at any time. So let me just check if I've got any questions. So far, no questions. Okay, well, no one's put any questions in the box, so I'm going to assume that everybody got way overloaded with information in our session today. And hopefully that means that we answered all your questions. If not, please feel free to reach out. We're going to start looking at what our topics will be for the second half of the year. Certainly we're going to be looking at parental leave as one of our topics, but we'd be happy to have any suggestions that you have forwarded through to us. But thank you for your time today, and good night.